Jameis Winston injured his knee on this play, and the concern is that it could be season-ending. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and this is your number one source for learning about the unique medical side of the world of sports. I know I'm a little bit late to this one, but let's take a look at Jameis Winston's injury. Apparently, Winston has already had an MRI this evening, and the initial concern from the team is an ACL tear and possibly an MCL tear. When we look at the play where he was injured, the mechanism would certainly fit with those two possible injuries. As Winston is being tackled here, that left knee gets sort of stuck outward as his body's being pulled down to the ground. And as he falls down to the ground here, what I want you to pay attention to is how much that left knee bends inward while the rest of his body is positioned on that same side. This combination here of that knee falling inward is what we call a knee valgus position, which is basically this idea of the knee essentially falling inward here relative to the trunk and the rest of the body. Now, if you've watched some of my ACL tear videos, you know this is a common position where we see ACL tears. The other thing we'll see often is the foot positioned outward here next to a rotation, knee coming inward, and also his trunk is leaning over that injured side. So classic position for when we can see a torn ACL. The other part of this is, of course, the MCL. And if we think of our knee anatomy here as we're looking at this play, the MCL is the ligament that runs up and down on the inside of the knee. So it's going to be sitting right here on this position. His LCL is going to be positioned out here. And then, of course, his ACL and his PCL cross one another inside the knee joint. When we see the knee buckle inward like this, an ACL tear typically occurs when the knee is more straight or extended. And the MCL tear more frequently happens either when it's perfectly straight with just a blow from the outside, or when we see this position where the knee gets into a severe amount of flexion while it's being twisted. The other thing we have to worry about in this position is, of course, the meniscus, which are these two shock absorbing structures within the knee, because those are going to be predisposed to being injured. Number one, anytime we have an ACL tear and an MCL tear is sort of part of what comes with that injury, but also because of this amount of twist that we see within Winston's knee as he's going down to the ground. A couple more views here as Winston plants with that left leg right there. Just subtly, that knee starts to fall inward, continues down, keeps twisting with that foot rotated outwards. And finally, in this position, all we're really seeing is kind of the tail end of how that knee has already been twisted as he's falling over to that left side. Now, before the team even got the MRI, they already had a pretty good sense of whether or not they were worried about an ACL tear. Our physical exam maneuvers are actually pretty reliable in these circumstances, and so oftentimes when we see somebody on the field with a knee injury, we have a pretty good sense right away of if it's an ACL or if it's an MCL, LCL. We have to remember with an ACL tear is it's such a severe injury that oftentimes there's other structures of the knee that get damaged that we can't really understand until we get the MRI. Oftentimes those play a big role in the ultimate recovery and sort of 5, 10, 20-year prognosis when we start thinking about the health of the cartilage, the menisci sitting inside the knee, as opposed to just purely the ACL tear. If we look quickly at our anatomy tool here, another important thing to understand is that the deep fibers of the MCL ligament are actually anchored onto and attached to that medial meniscus, kind of right here in this region. So there's this relationship between the MCL and the menisci that we don't see when it comes to the LCL on the outside of the knee because it's not anchored to that lateral meniscus. In fact, these three structures are so commonly injured together, the ACL, the MCL, and the meniscus, that we term it the unhappy triad. So we'll see what the final word is from the Saints, but unfortunately we've got a mechanism that fits with an ACL tear and an MCL tear. We've got early reports of it, and so I suspect that that's what we're ultimately gonna hear is the case with Winston. That's it for the video, everybody. Let me know as always any questions or comments down below. Hope you learned something here, and until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.